Happy Monday, and welcome back to the Lorden Arts channel. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. Case Cracked is the show where we look into a mystery, and what are the critical pieces that help solve that mystery. Today's episode is called The Third Bullet. It's July 21st, 1957, in Hawthorne, California. Around midnight, a group of 4 teenagers who had just left a party decided to venture down a well-known lover's lane on Van Ness Avenue. As the group sat in their 1949 Ford, they decided to roll down a window. Immediately, a gun was shoved into 17-year-old Robert Dewar's face. "This is a robbery. All I want is your money. I won't hurt you," the man said. He then forced everyone to undress before stealing several items of value, including a few watches. Using surgical tape and a flashlight, he bound each of the 17-year-old boys and their 15-year-old dates with strips torn from their own clothing before covering their eyes with tape. He then sexually assaulted one of the young women. What happened next comes in Robert's own words. Quote, "He said, 'I think I'm going to kill you. I want you to march out into the field.' The girls were crying, and I didn't know what to think. I couldn't believe this was going to happen." However, once they were out in the field, they heard their car door close, and then it simply drove away. An hour and a half later, about 6 miles away, Officer Richard Phillips and Officer Milton Curtis were sitting near an intersection waiting for speeders and other traffic violators to drive by when a 1949 Ford sedan pulled up, stopped, and then drove through a red light. They pulled the vehicle over and ordered the driver out. As he started to comply, a second police cruiser drove by and asked if they needed help. Both officers waved them on. When they turned back to the red light runner, they were met with a .22 caliber snub-nosed revolver. The driver fired 6 shots, hitting each officer 3 times. Officer Phillips, who had 2 years on the job and was a top marksman on the police force, was able to fire 3 shots back into the fleeing vehicle before using his radio to call for help. Unfortunately, both he and Officer Curtis, who had only been on the job for 2 months, died before they could reach the hospital. As police scrambled to investigate the killing of their officers, the 4 teenagers were found, wandering the streets asking for help. When they relayed their story, investigators knew the killing of the 2 officers was related to their case, with the obvious linkage being the car. That car was found quickly just blocks away. It had been hit with 2 of Officer Phillips' bullets. But where was the third? Fingerprints were taken from the car as well as the clothing the teen group were wearing when they were robbed. No match for the prints were found, but they now had a description of their suspect. He was about 6 feet tall and weighed around 200 pounds with short hair. Roadblocks were set up, the news and media were alerted, a reward was offered, but the case just wasn't progressing. In 1958, True Detective magazine featured the murders along with a plea for the public's help. All leads that came in from it were checked, but nothing turned up. In 1960, a resident of Manhattan Beach called police to report that he had found 2 watches and a revolver sunk into the dirt of his backyard. When investigators examined the items, they found that both watches belonged to the teenagers who were robbed the night of the murder. Ballistics tests from the gun were consistent with bullets taken from the bodies of the officers. The gun was a rare 9-shot Harrington and Richardson .22 revolver. However, it could not conclusively be identified as the murder weapon because of the poor condition it was found in. It's believed that when the suspect abandoned the 49 Ford, he then fled through local backyards. While hopping fences, he possibly lost the watches and the gun. When the revolver serial number was traced, it was found to have been purchased 4 days before the murders from a Sears store in Shreveport, Louisiana. The owner had given the name G.D. Wilson, along with a fake address in Miami, Florida. Near that Sears store was a YMCA, and a customer staying there used the name George D. Wilson, stated he was also from Miami, and he signed into the registry using that name and the same fake address in Miami. In the years to come, every George D. Wilson from the Miami area was tracked down. None of them were a match for their suspect. For decades, the case remained open but cold until El Segundo officers received a tip in September of 2002. A woman claimed that her uncle had bragged about killing 2 police officers in the late 1950s. When her uncle's fingerprints were compared to those found in the getaway car, they weren't a match. However, it did bring the case renewed attention. It was then decided that the original prints would be checked with the FBI Integrated Automated Fingerprint Identification System, or IAFIS. There, they found a match in a man named Gerald Fitton Mason. Mason was born in South Carolina in 1934. After a brief stint in the Army in the 1950s, he was arrested for homebreaking and larceny. He only served 8 months on a 3-year sentence. From there, he hitchhiked to California. Along the way, purchased the gun used in the murders. Later in life, he returned to South Carolina and seemingly never crossed paths with police again. In 1960, he married his wife Betty and had 2 daughters who would in turn give them 3 grandchildren. Throughout the years, he prospered by owning several gas stations and convenience stores in the Columbia area. Signatures were compared from the YMCA registry and Sears store receipt. They were matched with current handwriting samples from Mason. Investigators also had 3 eyewitnesses who could still identify Mason: the 2 officers who were waved off the night of the murder, and a news reporter from the murder scene. He stated that Mason asked him for a ride home somewhere near the crime scene. On January 29, 2003, investigators arrived at Mason's door. They told him they were from El Segundo and were homicide detectives. "I think I need a lawyer," he responded. But then they told him that they were arresting him for the murder of 2 police officers back in 1957. Reportedly, he replied, "My God, you're here for that? That happened so long ago. I can't believe you're bothering me with that." Mason was arrested and taken in for questioning. At the station, his body was examined for old bullet wounds, and on the back of his right shoulder blade, investigators found a scar where he had been grazed by a bullet, the 3rd bullet shot from Officer Phillips's gun. Under questioning, Mason claimed to have no idea why he committed the crimes and said he had only bought the revolver to deter robberies while he was hitchhiking. When his home was searched, investigators found a gun collection that contained another one of those rare 9-shot .22 revolvers. Mason was charged with 2 counts of murder as well as charges for the kidnapping, robbery, and sexual assault. His first day in court, Mason accepted a plea deal that would drop the charges of kidnapping, robbery, and sexual assault, while he pled guilty to 2 charges of murder. He claimed that there was no fighting the evidence against him, and that he wanted to save his family from hearing the terrible details of that night. He was sentenced to 2 life terms in prison. At his sentencing, Mason addressed the court and asked forgiveness for his crimes. Quote, "I feel like I'm dreaming. It makes no sense. It's contrary to everything I believe. At no other time in my life have I intentionally harmed anyone. I don't know why I did this. Please forgive me. Do not be bitter." Officer Curtis's family was not impressed. They believe Mason was only sorry because he had been caught. Carolyn, Officer Phillips's daughter, said, "You caused our mother to become a widow with 3 babies to raise alone. Your cowardly act shattered our lives forever. We cannot and will not forgive you." Perhaps the most poignant words were spoken by Jean Curtis, Officer Milton Curtis's wife. "He was my first love. The night of the murder, we had a little argument, and I've always felt bad about that. We didn't get to say goodbye." Now she's left with her memories and a plaque from the police department with her husband's badge on it. In 2009, Mason was denied parole and was told his next hearing would not be until 2024. However, on January 22, 2017, he died of natural causes in prison. Case cracked. I would like to thank the LA Times, the New York Times, CBSNews.com, the Officer Down Memorial page, WISTV.com, 247wallstreet.com, the Claremont Sun, and DocPlayer.net. Of course, The biggest thank you goes to Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's case. And here she is now to discuss it with us. Christy, feels like we've had a little run of stories lately about people with hidden pasts. I feel like I'm going to start having nightmares about one of my family members coming to me and saying, like, John, do you know what I did 40 years ago? Mm-hmm. But here we're talking again about someone that seems like, yeah, he had some bumps kind of early in life, but wasn't a repeating offender necessarily, went and started a new family, and it just reminds me that these crimes hurt so many people. And of course, we're very focused on the victim and the victim's families, but his family kind of they become victims in this as well, because he has a wife that didn't know about this and now has to deal with the reality of it. Daughters and grandchildren that now have to deal with not having him around. Of course, he passed away since then, but for at least another 15 years, they could have had grandpa around, and he wasn't. Yeah. He was in jail because of this. I was also wondering, I'm just curious how his wife might have responded when she was finding out about this.
Well, according to the Chicago Tribune, LA County Sheriff's Detective Kevin Lowe was among the arresting officers, and he said, "We explained to his wife why we were there and what the charges were. She was also very shocked at what we had to say. She lived with this man for over 40 years and apparently never knew that part of him, that hidden past."
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what that would be like. That's...
it would be, for me, it would be such a sense of betrayal.
Yeah. Could you imagine? Can you imagine if someone came to the door and was like, "Hey, Christy, your husband did this, 20 years ago, 30 years ago." It's really, really tough.
Oh, yeah.
I do wonder, because of some of the quotes that we saw around his reaction, but because of something else in particular that kind of stuck out in my mind. When I was reading through this script at first, you hit this mention of the gun being found in someone's backyard. Mm-hmm. But then you also mentioned that they search his house and they find the exact same gun in his house. But we know that they traced the serial number to help track him down from the gun that was in the backyard. So we know the gun in the backyard is the one that was used. Mm-hmm. Was he really, reformed? Was he really someone that was trying to run away from this past? Or was he someone that was keeping a relic of it in some way? Did he go find another model of the same gun so he could have some memory of this?
Well, what else did he do? How else did he get it? It's a rare one to begin with. So, you have to look for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you would think, if he was rehabilitating himself, that he wouldn't want reminders of what he had done. And that is a very clear reminder.
It is. It makes you wonder. I think there's, people are certain ways in terms of maybe dealing in their families or presenting who they are in their families, presenting who they are even to their spouses or loved ones. But when you're all alone in the dark, in an empty house with your own thoughts, it just makes you wonder, is this guy looking up at the wall over there saying, "Oh, that's the same type of gun"? I don't know. Also strange that the FBI basically had the keys to solving this case sitting in their data store, mm-hmm. but it was sitting there for a long time. We're talking decades before that information gets accessed. Why did this take so long?
It's something that I've been hearing a lot lately, and boy, it does not make me happy. In 2003, the LA Times reported that the Los Angeles Police Department had more than 6,000 prints from unsolved homicides that have not been forwarded to the FBI's computers for comparison due to staffing shortages and bad planning. Staffing shortages, I hear a lot, but you hear the bad planning on top of that, and you're like, oh.
Yeah. How many different stories do we hear like this with, sexual assault kits that aren't being processed, that are being backlogged, hundreds of them sitting there for years that could help prosecute cases. Well, hopefully, since we heard about that in 2003, I would like to think that those 6,000 prints have since been updated or uploaded to IAFIS. But I'm happy that the data is there. It's just taking that step, I guess, to establish the linkage. If the FBI is holding on to this big data store and they don't have the police departments uploading their potential print matches, like, this isn't going to work.
No.
But it is nice. I think we've had a few stories now where we've talked about IAFIS being kind of the key thing that is helping to crack these cases.
Oh, yeah. IAFIS was a game changer. IAFIS was a game changer, all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a new version now you want to tell us about?
There is. There's a new version called Next Generation Identification.
Okay.
Now, this is from their website. NGI provides the criminal justice community with the world's largest and most efficient electronic repository of biometric and criminal history information. They say we are no longer limited to just fingerprints and DNA at crime scenes. Some of the other things we have are palm prints. You've got irises being scanned, facial recognition. Excuse me.
I'm supposed to be the sick one here.
I know. But yeah, this system stores all of that and more. So it's finally bringing everything together.
That's pretty cool. And I like that they've kind of thought about it and changed it. Because before it was like, it's a fingerprint system. And now it's like, well, we're collecting all this different type of biometric information. How great would it be at some point? I don't know if this type of solve will ever come, but remember how much focus was in the gait of the person on the Terry Beavers case and how they walked? I mean, it's a little bit of a biometric, thing to be analyzed. I don't know that it's necessarily like a signature or like a fingerprint, or obviously nowhere near like DNA, where you've got, basically a large amount of information that you can kind of line up and say, okay, we're 99 million% sure that this is a match. But the fact that they've opened it up to that, and we don't know what technology is coming down the road, what other ways.
I know.
Yeah.
This will lead to all other different avenues that they can work with. I think it'll really come up with some fantastic things.
Yeah. But we got to be sure that the local departments are uploading their pieces of those puzzles as well. So
yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for all your hard work on this, Christy. We really appreciate you. Thanks for hanging in there through the frog in your throat. I think everything's going to be okay. And I've got some other people to thank right now. Thank you, PayPal supporters Perlette Toussaint, Sandy Reed, Melissa Heinbach, and Amanda Beard. For over 6 years, we've been making all of our videos with limited commercials. In some cases, no commercials at all. We can only do that thanks to the support of this amazing community. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordandarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even just buy us a coffee, like Kelly recently did. Remember, you can get another Lord and Art story every week on the Seriously Mysterious podcast. A new episode is coming tomorrow and every Tuesday after that. Visit seriouslymysterious.com and subscribe on your favorite podcatchers. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon below if you want to catch one of our weekly Secret Studio live shows. And of course, I'll be back with a new unsolved mystery for you on Friday, right here on the Lord and Arts channel.